They said it out loud, in front of everyone, like I wasn't even there. At my sister's baby shower, while people were laughing and sipping lemonade, I heard my mother-in-law say, "Don't let her touch the gifts. She's cursed." She didn't whisper. She didn't pull someone aside. She said it with a smile, like it was a casual observation, like she was commenting on the weather. And then my cousin Selma chimed in with, "She lost her baby. She's bad luck." Just like that. My pain reduced to a superstition, passed around like gossip over cupcakes and baby booties. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My throat closed up and my hands started to shake. I just stood there, staring at the table full of pastel-colored gift bags right next to the one I had spent 3 nights stitching by hand. Everyone else kept chatting. No one stepped in. No one said, "That's not okay." I felt invisible, like I had been erased by the very people who once cried with me at the hospital. I thought I could stay strong, smile through it, maybe slip out early without making a scene. But something happened. Just before they cut the cake, when everyone was gathered around for pictures, my 7-year-old son, Nico, quietly walked over to the gift table. He ran his fingers over the wrapped packages like he was choosing a treasure. Then he looked up and said, loud enough for every single person to hear, "I picked the one she made. Want to know why it's the only one that isn't empty?" The entire yard went still. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Leora, my sister, froze with a knife still in her hand. And all I could do was stare at my son, standing tall in his little blue button-down, defending me with more courage than any adult in that yard. That one sentence cracked something open, not just in the crowd, in me. I had walked into that shower expecting to be tolerated, maybe ignored. I expected whispers, tension, maybe awkward hugs. What I didn't expect was that my son, my quiet, thoughtful boy, would be the one to remind everyone that grief doesn't make you cursed. It makes you human. And I wasn't empty. I had made something beautiful. But to understand why that moment shattered the silence, why it meant everything, you have to know what led up to it. You have to know about the gift, the way people looked at me, and the truth about what I really lost. Let me tell you what happened that day, start to finish. Because what happened at that baby shower didn't just change how people saw me. It changed how I saw myself. The baby shower was held in Leora's backyard under a wide canvas tent strung with lights and floating white balloons. Everything was soft and picture-perfect. Mint green tablecloths, a grazing table with lavender macarons, and personalized cookies shaped like baby onesies. My sister had gone all out, and to be honest, it looked beautiful. She always had a way of making ordinary things feel magical. I showed up wearing a pale yellow dress I hadn't worn in years. It still fit, though it felt tighter around my chest. I had tried to look cheerful, tried to tuck away the weight I carried like a bruise under my skin. I told myself it was Leora's day, not mine. I would smile, bring my gift, be supportive, and leave before the attention turned toward games and cake. I just needed to get through a couple of hours. Leora was glowing. Everyone said it, and it was true. She had that second trimester brightness, the kind that makes people say things like, "She's just radiant." She hugged me tight when I arrived, her hand resting instinctively on her belly. I could feel the love in her hug. It wasn't fake. Leora had always loved me deeply, and that's part of why it hurt so much to feel so far away from her. There was a time when we talked every day. She was the first one I called when I found out I was pregnant 2 years ago. She helped me pick names, paint the nursery, fold tiny onesies that smelled like lavender detergent. And after I lost the baby, after I delivered a daughter who never cried, never breathed, everything between us changed. Not because she didn't care, but because she didn't know how to reach me. Most people didn't. At first they sent flowers, meals, cards with gentle words. Then, when I didn't bounce back, when I wasn't the same happy Kaya at family barbecues or holidays, the invitations slowed down. Some people avoided eye contact, others made awkward, rushed conversation. I could feel them pulling away, as if grief were a sickness you could catch from standing too close. I had stopped going to baby showers. I turned down invites, let messages go unanswered. But when Leora called me last month, she said, "I know it's hard, but it would mean everything to me if you came." And I believed her. I wanted to be strong enough to say yes. So I started working on something with my hands, something I could bring. A gift that was more than just something off a registry. I stitched a blanket, not just any blanket. I made it from soft brushed cotton in muted greens and creams, colors that felt peaceful. I lined it with fleece and stitched a border of delicate hearts. I didn't tell anyone, but I sewed the name Sarai into the hem, my baby's name. Small and hidden, a secret offering. My grief folded into something useful, something warm. I brought that blanket to the shower in a simple brown paper bag tied with a pale blue ribbon. No fancy wrapping, just honesty. When I walked into the yard that day, I immediately felt eyes on me. Not everyone, but enough. I caught Vera, my mother-in-law, giving me one of her quiet, tight-lipped nods, the kind that pretends to be polite but carries judgment in every crease. Selma, my cousin, looked me up and down with her usual performative smile. She waved but didn't approach. My husband Jolyne had dropped me off earlier. He had work to finish and offered to come back later, but I told him I'd be fine. Part of me wanted to prove I could handle it on my own. Part of me already regretted that decision. I stayed close to the edges of the party, offering to help refill drinks, arranging napkins, keeping busy so I wouldn't have to sit and chat. I found comfort in tasks. It was easier than pretending I belonged in a conversation about strollers and diaper brands. Every now and then, someone would nod or smile politely. No one really stopped to talk. Nico was the only one who kept close. My sweet boy. He had insisted on coming. He loves his Aunt Leora and had picked out a stuffed bear to give her. He's only 7, but sometimes I think he understands emotions more clearly than the adults around him. He didn't ask me if I was okay. He just stayed near, handing me napkins or taking sips of lemonade beside me in silence. He made me feel seen without saying a word. As the guests started settling into their chairs for gift opening, I placed my bag near the others on the table. A few were lavishly wrapped. Some had brand-name tags still sticking out. Mine sat quietly in the corner. I didn't expect it to stand out. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I just wanted to give something real. But the truth is, no matter how quiet I tried to be, someone always finds a reason to remind me of what I've lost. And that's when I heard it. That voice, my mother-in-law standing behind me. Don't let her touch the gifts. She's cursed. I didn't turn around when I heard her voice. I stood completely still, my hand resting on the edge of the gift table, my eyes locked on the bag I had placed there just moments before. Don't let her touch the gifts. She's cursed. It was Vera, my mother-in-law. Her voice wasn't angry or loud. It was calm, confident, as if she were giving helpful advice like warning someone about a loose railing or a food allergy. But the words dropped like ice water down my back. I waited for someone to say something, for a single voice to interrupt, to challenge her, to ask what she meant. I waited, and I heard nothing. Just the soft clinking of glasses and the sound of cutlery being set down at the table behind me. Then Selma's voice joined in. She laughed under her breath. She lost her baby. It's tragic, of course, but let's not pretend it didn't change the energy around her. That's how they said it, like I was radioactive, like the worst thing that had ever happened to me had made me dangerous, like I might poison the party by being too close to the pile of pastel gifts. I didn't turn around, I didn't defend myself, I didn't say a word, because in that moment, I felt myself shrink. I became a version of myself I hate, silent, small, afraid. My chest burned, but my hands stayed frozen. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear anything else, but I still didn't move. I thought about grabbing my gift and leaving, walking out, catching a cab, going home where it was quiet and safe, where no one looked at me like a bad omen. But then I saw Nico, sitting under the shade of the lemon tree with a paper plate of fruit and crackers in his lap. He was watching me. He tilted his head, curious, calm, like he was waiting to see what I would do. I couldn't leave. I stepped away from the gift table and walked toward the far edge of the yard. I needed space to breathe. I needed to disappear for a few minutes without actually leaving. I stood beside a small rose bush and picked at the hem of my dress, trying to stop my hands from shaking. I looked back at the table. The gifts looked like any others at a baby shower, decorative, full of good intentions. But mine felt different now. I had touched it. I had made it. What did they think was inside? A curse? A shadow? Did they think grief could cling to thread and fabric and somehow find its way into a newborn's crib? What kind of people believe that? The truth is, Vera had never really accepted me. Even before I lost Sarai, she treated me like someone Jolyne had settled for. When we got married, she smiled in photos but never welcomed me into her heart, and after the loss, it only got worse. She didn't say anything cruel out loud, not at first, but she stopped visiting. She stopped calling. She stopped asking about Nico. And now, standing in that yard full of my own family, I realized how far I had been pushed out. Selma was no better. She had always been competitive, always the first to announce promotions, new cars, vacations. When I lost my baby, she barely looked me in the eye at the next family gathering, as if I reminded her of something she didn't want to face. And Leora, sweet, loyal Leora, was across the yard chatting with guests, completely unaware of what had just happened. I took a deep breath and sat on one of the folding chairs near the edge of the yard. Nico walked over and sat beside me without saying a word. He handed me a plastic cup of lemonade. "Thanks," I whispered. "Why are you sitting here alone?" he asked. "I'm just taking a break," I said. "Are you sad again?" His voice was quiet but direct. He didn't ask with pity. He asked because he knew. He always knew. "I'm okay, baby," I said. "Just a little tired." He looked across the yard at the gift table. "You made the one with the hearts, right? The soft one?" "Yeah, that's the one. I like it. It's the only one that feels like love." That was the moment I realized something I hadn't been ready to face. Nico didn't care what they said. He didn't see me as broken. He didn't think I was cursed. He saw what I had made and knew it came from love. I looked at my son and felt something steady settle in my chest. I hadn't defended myself, but I didn't need to. Not yet. Because I knew that blanket wasn't just a gift. It was proof that love can survive anything, even silence, even shame. And I wasn't going to hide from that. I stayed quiet, but I made a decision. I wouldn't stop Nico if he chose to speak. I sat with Nico for a long time beneath the lemon tree. The chatter from the other side of the yard faded into a soft hum. Leora was opening cards now, laughing with her friends as she read notes aloud and held up baby onesies. The kind of joy that used to be mine. For a moment, I closed my eyes and let the breeze brush against my skin. I imagined what it would feel like to be part of it, not as a ghost or an afterthought, but as a sister, a guest, a woman who belonged. Nico leaned into my side, resting his head gently against my arm. His hair smelled like sunscreen and vanilla frosting. I looked down at him and brushed a crumb off his shirt. He didn't ask me why I hadn't said anything back to Vera or Selma. He didn't need to. Kids notice things in a different way. They feel the gaps between words. They recognize silence as clearly as shouting. I knew he had seen something in me shift. I also knew he had made a quiet decision too, though I didn't yet understand what it was. Across the yard, Leora's best friend Camilla stood and clapped her hands, announcing it was time for the gift opening. Everyone began gathering in a semicircle near the table where the gifts were stacked. Chairs were pulled in, phones were lifted to take pictures, and Leora sat down on a cushioned bench with her feet propped up and a huge smile on her face. That's when I felt the pull again, the urge to disappear. My body tensed as the crowd began to focus, and for a moment I considered slipping away behind the hedges, calling Jolyne, asking him to come pick me up before the unease swallowed me whole. But Nico stood up. He didn't ask me what I wanted to do. He didn't ask permission. He walked toward the gift table slowly, his fingers brushing along the corners of the wrapped boxes, his little face scanning each one as if he were solving a puzzle only he understood. I stood too, my heart suddenly pounding harder than before. I started to step forward to reach out and pull him back, but something told me not to. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't acting out of fear or confusion. He was calm, focused, like he knew what he needed to do. Leora had already opened a few gifts, baby monitors, a diaper cake, a custom swaddle set with his name embroidered on it. The mood was cheerful and relaxed until Nico spoke. I picked the one she made. His voice was clear. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the chatter like glass breaking on tile. Every head turned. A few people laughed, confused. One woman said, "Ah," thinking it was a child's moment of sweetness. But Nico wasn't done. Want to know why it's the only one that isn't empty? Now everything stopped. No more laughter, no polite chatter, just silence. He pointed to the brown paper bag tied with blue ribbon, the one I had placed at the very edge of the table, far from the more polished, expensive packages. Leora looked from Nico to the bag, then slowly reached for it. She didn't say a word. She untied the ribbon and pulled the quilt out of the bag, letting it unfold in her hands. It looked so different in her lap, bigger, brighter. She held it up, letting everyone see the delicate green and cream pattern, the stitched hearts, the soft fleece lining. The blanket glowed in the golden afternoon light. I could see her fingers trace the corners, turning it over in her lap. And then I saw her find it, the name, stitched small and neat along the inner hem, Sarai. Her eyes locked with mine. Leora stood up and walked toward me. Everyone watched. No one said a word. She didn't ask for an explanation. She didn't question what I had done. She just hugged me, tight. Her arms wrapped around my shoulders with a fierceness that caught me off guard. She smelled like citrus and tears. "This is the most beautiful thing anyone has ever given me," she whispered. I couldn't speak. I barely managed to nod. Behind her, Vera looked down at her lap, her jaw tight. Selma crossed her arms and looked away. No one clapped. No one tried to turn it into a joke. They knew. They all knew. That moment broke something open in the yard. The neat curtain between the celebration and the things no one wanted to talk about was gone. My grief had stepped into the sunlight, not to ruin the day, but to prove that it still had something to offer, that I still had something to give. And Nico, my sweet boy, had made that possible. He hadn't asked me if he could. He hadn't needed to, because what he did wasn't about asking. It was about knowing when it's time for the truth to speak for itself. Leora held the quilt in her hands like it was sacred. She ran her fingers over the stitching, carefully tracing each line and curve of the small embroidered hearts. She didn't speak right away, and neither did anyone else. There was a stillness in the air, as if the party had been paused and everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. I stood a few feet away, watching her. I didn't move. I couldn't. My legs felt heavy, my chest tight, but not with shame, not anymore. I was watching my sister hold something I made with every ounce of love I had left. That blanket wasn't just a gift. It was a part of me, of Sarai, of everything I had carried in silence. Leora looked up. Her eyes were shining, but she wasn't crying out of pity. It was something else. Recognition. She saw me, not as a shadow of a tragedy, but as her sister, as someone who had shown up and given her something real. "This is handmade," she said softly, holding the quilt up for everyone to see. "Kaya made this." Her voice was steady. She didn't apologize for the tears in her eyes. She didn't try to turn the moment into a joke or smooth it over with small talk. She let it be what it was. The blanket was passed around, each person running their hands across the soft fabric. A few of Leora's friends murmured how beautiful it was. One woman asked if I sold them. I shook my head. I couldn't imagine making another one. That blanket had been a conversation between me and my grief, and now it was being heard out loud. "Someone asked what the name meant," Leora answered before I could. Sarai was Kaya's daughter. Silence again. But this time, it wasn't cold. It wasn't heavy with judgment. It was respectful, honest. A room of people finally looking at the thing they'd all been avoiding. "She never got to use hers," Leora continued, her voice shaking now. "But now her name will always be part of my son's life. That means everything to me." I didn't realize I was crying until I felt Nico's hand wrap around mine. He was standing beside me, quiet, proud. He leaned into my side like he had done under the lemon tree and whispered, "She likes it." I nodded, unable to speak. My throat felt tight, but not with pain, with something else. Gratitude, maybe. Relief. Vera stood up slowly from her seat. She took a step toward the gift table, then paused. Her eyes were on the blanket, but she didn't say anything. Not to me, not to Leora. She simply turned and sat back down. I didn't need her words. I didn't want them anymore. Selma made a noise like she was going to say something, but Leora shot her a look, a quiet warning that this wasn't the time. Selma stayed silent. The rest of the afternoon moved slowly, but everything felt different. People looked at me differently, not with sympathy, but with something closer to respect. A few came over quietly and thanked me for the gift. One woman, a friend of Leora's named Jasmine, hugged me and said, "That was brave. Not just the quilt, all of it." I didn't feel brave. I felt raw and exposed, but also lighter than I had in a long time. When it was time to cut the cake, Leora took Nico's hand and brought him up to stand beside her. "My nephew picked the most meaningful gift of the day," she told everyone, "and I think that deserves the first slice." Nico beamed. His cheeks turned red as people clapped, and he looked at me with wide eyes like he wasn't sure what he had done to deserve it. I just smiled at him and mouthed, "Thank you." Later, while guests trickled out and the sun began to dip below the rooftops, I helped Leora carry gifts inside. She placed the quilt gently over the back of the rocking chair in her nursery and stood in the doorway looking at it for a long time. She turned to me and said, "I don't know why it took me this long to say it, but I'm sorry. For how distant I've been. I didn't know how to help you. But this helped me." I stepped forward and hugged her, holding on a little longer than usual. "I didn't need you to fix it," I said. "I just needed you to remember her with me." And she did. That was the moment I knew something had shifted, not just in how people saw me, but in how I saw myself. I wasn't cursed. I wasn't a shadow. I was a mother. I was a sister. I was someone who still had love to give. And finally, they saw that too. A week after the shower, Leora sent me a photo. Her baby bump was more pronounced, and she was sitting in the nursery with her feet up, cradling the quilt in her lap. Behind her, the room was soft and warm, walls painted a muted blue, sunlight filtering in through sheer curtains. In her message, she wrote, "He kicks every time I hold this. I think he knows it's stitched with love." I stared at that picture for a long time. For months, I had believed I didn't belong in rooms like that anymore. Rooms filled with rattles and lullabies and bright plans for the future. I had convinced myself that grief had pushed me into a different category, one where people smiled politely but never let me in too close. And maybe that was true for some, but not for everyone. Not for Leora. Not for Nico. Not anymore. That afternoon at the baby shower didn't erase my pain. It didn't make what happened with Sarai disappear. Her absence is still the shape of my days, the weight I carry in quiet moments. But something shifted. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like my grief was something to hide. I didn't feel like a threat or a superstition or a bad memory someone else wanted to forget. I felt seen. I used to believe silence was strength, that holding it all in made me more in control, more dignified. I thought if I just stayed quiet long enough, the discomfort would pass and people would stop looking at me like I was about to break. But silence didn't protect me. It erased me. Nico changed that. My son, at 7 years old, said what I couldn't, not with anger or bitterness, but with clarity. He reminded everyone that love doesn't disappear just because someone is gone. It doesn't rot or vanish or infect. It grows. It transforms. It stays in the things we make and the people we raise. That moment at the gift table didn't just prove that I still had love to give. It proved that love could still be received. After the shower, Vera didn't speak to me. She left without a goodbye. But that didn't sting the way it used to. Her voice, the one that had once taken up so much space in my mind, felt smaller now. Selma never followed up with a message or a comment. That was fine. Not everyone needed to change, but the ones who mattered, the ones I had feared drifting away, had stepped closer. Jolyne came home from work that evening and held me for a long time without asking questions. When I showed him the photo Leora sent, he kissed my forehead and said, "She'll never forget that you gave her something no one else could." Nico asked if he could sleep with the stuffed bear he had picked out for the shower. I told him yes, and as I tucked him in, he looked up at me and said, "Sarai would have liked it too, right?" "Yes," I told him. "She would have loved it." That night, I sat in Sarai's room. We never changed it. The crib was still in the corner, the mobile still hanging, the books still lined up on the shelf. I held one of the quilts I had stitched during those long, hopeful nights and ran my fingers along the edge. I didn't cry. Not that night. I just sat with the silence and felt for the first time that it was full of memory, full of meaning, full of a love that never left. Sometimes we think the only way to heal is to move on, to pack away what hurts and pretend we're starting fresh. But healing, for me, came when I allowed myself to carry it forward. When I gave it a name, a form, a place in the lives of the people I still love. That baby blanket now sits in Leora's nursery, draped over the rocking chair she'll use to hold her son. She told me she runs her hands over the stitching when she gets nervous or overwhelmed. She says it reminds her that she's not alone, that her child is wrapped in something that was born from loss but made with care. That quilt carries 2 names now, one she gave, one I lost. Both matter. And I no longer believe that love has an expiration date. It lives in the hands that give. It lives in the voices that speak up. And it lives in the small, steady courage of a child who stood beside a table and told the truth, even when no one else would. That is what broke the silence. That is what changed everything. If this story touched you, if it made you think differently about grief, motherhood, or the quiet strength we carry in silence, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you've ever been made to feel like your pain made you unwelcome, I want to hear your voice in the comments. You matter here. And if you want more stories like this, real, raw, and honest, make sure to subscribe to the channel. There's more to tell, and I'd be honored if you stayed to hear it. Thank you for being here.